I'm glad some of you have recovered from whatever you did last night, and you can still make it here to join us. I'm gonna give you a bit of an overview of the Vietnamese consumer landscape and the economy and what's been going on most recently. I may ask you to do some work as we go through. So this is me. I'm old. I've been here a long time. I have a marketing and research business. We basically help our clients make better choices by understanding their customers. So Vietnam over the last 10 years has averaged at about 6% GDP growth, and the expectation is that that continues. So can any of you, because I want you to do some work, and Rich, you can help, suggest why that might continue? Why is Vietnam such a high-growing economy? Please, Rich, shout out.
Young population, young and large.
Young and large population.
I keep your company that is still very low.
It is, yeah, relatively. Any other reasons it might be growing, please?
Stable.
Politically stable. I used to have that. These are the reasons I put forth. Number 9 used to be political stability, but in the last 2 years, I've had to take that away because there's been quite a bit of upheaval. Maybe it'll come back again next year. But these are the 8 core reasons that I'm going to run you through today as to why I certainly believe the next decade in Vietnam will be very positive. So as I said, about 6% growth on average. That includes coverage of the COVID years, which would have brought that average down. This is just looking at what happened last year. So 7% growth, good industrial production growth, nice 40% rise in exports, nearly 10% rise in foreign investment who spent money here as opposed to promise. And tourism from international markets rebounded 40%, getting back close to where it was before COVID. We think this year is going to be about 6.5% economic growth in 2025. There's some numbers on retail there, which I won't go into now, but I'll be talking about those a little bit at length. So export growth, 14%, pretty significant. You've all heard the idea of China +1, export growth out of Vietnam. Can anyone guess what proportion of Vietnam's exports are considered high-tech? So high-tech products. Also,
Sorry,
well, give me a percentage. 5. 10. 3. Yeah. So this is the general perception towards Vietnam from the international community. The actual number is closer to 40%. So exports grew 14%. 20 years ago, high-tech products took 4% of Vietnam's exports. Today they're at 14%. Companies like Samsung are a huge contributor to that. And there is an argument that we don't necessarily add too much value. Parts are imported, assembled, and exported to primarily US and European markets. But 16% value is added currently, and that's improving every year. Vietnam has a lot of trading agreements, so it's very interconnected in the global supply chain. So if I look across all countries, including China, including India, Vietnam on this measure of global interconnectivity, which is from the World Economic Forum, is the highest at 182%. So it's the most interconnected trading country in the globe today. This is a very quick look at the numbers, key numbers from 2024. So a population just surpassed 100 million, GDP per capita about 4,300 per capita, lots of online users from Zalo, the local messaging app, TikTok. Digital economy is 36 billion, so 8% of GDP. Everyone's got a smartphone. not too many cars or too many motorbikes. I also have an operation in Indonesia. We need to add zeros to those numbers to be equivalent to Indonesia, much larger population, obviously. Most people are banked. So, give you a quick run through on some of the key numbers. So, tourism is back. So, most people focus on inbound tourists. They're mostly coming from China and Korea, but obviously other parts of the world too. So, they grew 40%, but the domestic tourism is really what drives the industry. So, we've got a massive contribution of domestic tourism and spend.
Got it.
Consumer demand. So consumer demand is a big issue. I had a very similar presentation 2 days ago to 530 investors, mostly private equity and listed equity investors at an investor forum. And obviously a lot of those companies invest in consumer or retail-oriented companies. This is, don't worry about the actual numbers. They are in billions of dollars. But we can see really that the increase in 2024 has been 2.3%, which is very low. So if you're Vietnamese, any Vietnamese in the audience? Yes, okay. So you probably felt amongst your family and friends that society wasn't so dynamic last year. A lot of companies, friends who work for different companies would have had a very tough time. That's below inflation. So 2.3%, inflation was about 3.5%. So essentially flat. From a volume perspective, there was also quite a large currency devaluation last year. So if I look at the same numbers in dollars, then the retail market actually contracted in dollar terms. Wouldn't be normal to do that, but it's interesting from a perspective of the international community. And part of the reason for this is consumer sentiment. So consumer sentiment picked up in January. January was a big holiday month for the Lunar New Year or tax. But the 2024 mean of positive consumer sentiment was about 13 points below what it was pre-COVID. So there's still a lot of not optimism coming from the Vietnamese consumer place. So we've seen people saving harder. So most people had their savings completely wiped out during COVID, and they're rebuilding that nest egg, if you like. And we saw a lot more bank deposits last year. So a tough domestic consumer economy. So really we have very good manufacturing, industrial, export-driven economy helped by FDIs. So the export growth, 75% of those exporting companies are foreign invested companies. So the link with foreign investment and matter to the king is very close. So consumer retail's demand sluggish at best. A lot of people going out less, spending less on big items, looking for value where they can find value in the normal things that they buy. So anyone in the FMCG market will see people down trading. Let's take beer, you should probably all had some last night, down trading from a more premium beer to a more mid-range beer. So our expectations for the coming year, there's going to be a bit of there's going to be a lot of change and dynamism in the manufacturing data, given some of the trade wars that seem to be starting. We've seen a great picture from a macro point of view on manufacturing and industry and foreign direct investment, but very tough from a domestic economy point of view. So two very contrasting points of view on what's happening with the Vietnamese economy. So we're expecting growth at around 6.5% this year, but consumer growth only just topping inflation levels expected for this year, somewhere about 5%. Traditional trade means a wet market or a grocery shop that is not a modern trade chain, doesn't have aircon, doesn't have a cashier. So in 2000, they were 100% of all sales, maybe 99, but close to 100. Today, they're 62%. And for the first time last year, the traditional trade in absolute terms had less money going through it than in any year than the prior year. That's the first time I've ever seen that happen. So in absolute terms, they've lost. In share, they've lost. This is the share between traditional trade. So modern trade is like a supermarket, a mini market, convenience store, e-commerce, I guess you all know pretty well. So the big change last year was there was a 40% growth in e-commerce, up to about $22 billion. The traditional trade not only lost share, but lost absolute money going through that channel. The modern trade grew in terms of outlets about 11%, but its actual value of the market only grew about 4.5%. So a lot of changes happening in the distribution and the retail marketplace. But the most controversial area is the first time the traditional trade would have really felt a decline in absolute terms, and a very significant jump last year in modern trade, in e-commerce sales. So about 11,600 outlets as of December 31 last year, modern trade outlets. I mean, if we go back to 19, there were only 6,000. Which category of modern trade outlets do you think has probably grown the most? Those of you who are Vietnamese and live here, what sort of outlets have you seen growing the most?
Convenience stores.
Sorry?
Convenience store.
Vegan stores? Huh? Convenience stores, okay. Anything else? Any other suggestions? So the most growth has actually been in beauty, health and wellness stores, and that's primarily been one brand, which is Hasaki. They've added over the last 24 months 136 outlets. But of course, in absolute terms, there's been a huge growth in pharmacy, and that's primarily been led by Longzhou or FPT Retail. They've added nearly 800 outlets. Not everybody's a winner. Mobile World or Taiyuan Didong dropped about 200 outlets in that time. So this is the changing nature. So yes, convenience stores are the highest number you will see on the street, followed by chain pharmacy, followed by mini market like King Food or Bakwasan. So other key trends, these are long-term trends, more thematic trends. Korean soft power is huge in this market. So don't think the Vietnamese look up to anything from Europe or the US. It's very much impacting their standards of beauty, their use of skincare, their viewing on television and streaming services tends to be very much Korean, the music habits. So Korean culture is very much looked up to more so than anything else. 20 years ago, it was a bit more Cantonese, as on the left, but now it's very Korean. Beauty standards have changed dramatically over time. The traditional concepts of beauty have really changed to a more modern format. Could anyone suggest what proportion of adult women in Vietnam have had some sort of aesthetic cosmetic surgery?
78.
72? You go to some very interesting nightclubs.
30%.
30%. Anyone else?
50. 51.
51%. I don't know, you guys who work at NFQ, you go out to some interesting places. It's only actually 4%. 4%. Still,
I know all.
you know all of them? The other sort of big social change that's taken place over the last 2 decades is when Rich was growing up, maybe everybody else is too young, you used to celebrate a new purchase, whether it was a motorbike, maybe a refrigerator at home. You might have your friends over and you might celebrate that fact or wash that fact with your friends. Today, very much experiences are what matter, and that's primarily driven by social media and sharing that you've run a marathon, you've climbed Fansipan, you went to a new Thai restaurant. All these things are very much about gaining social status. It's much more about experiences that the consumer has enjoyed as opposed to what they now own. We see lots of new fitness regimes. I think you have another session about looking at some healthcare products. We now see consumers following structured diet plans. We see 7 in 10 taking supplements for their health. We see people looking to address mental wellness with all sorts of digital tools and lifestyle choices that they make. So it's quite a leapfrogging from concepts of health or wellness 5 years ago as to what consumers are doing now. And again, that's primarily led by what people see on TikTok and Instagram and other feeds that give them a perspective that might be drawn from other markets. Household influence. I normally talk about rising household influence. Last year it edged up ever so tiny. So if you didn't get a good pay packet last year, then you weren't alone. This is what the distribution of household wealth looks like. So often when we're looking for clients, we're looking at people with discretionary income, the ability to spend money on things other than necessities. We take what is called ABCD class. So that's people earning $600 per household per month, not per individual, and above. And that's about just over half of the population. So 100 million people, we've got 28 million households. We've still got a lot of people, 44%, really not doing much beyond affording to get by and having necessities to live. So that's people earning less than $400 per month per household. So Rich lost a bit of money last year, so we're down 1 billionaire. We used to have 6. We've got 1,500 ultra high net worth, so people with a lot of liquid assets above 30 million. We've got 67,000 millionaires in Vietnam. And then we've got the detail on the same sort of detail you saw on the previous slide. Diaspora remittances, so this is overseas Vietnamese sending money back to family in Vietnam. They're actually down last year about 12% at 18 billion. So a lot of money flowing into households from relatives overseas. As an anecdote for rising affluence and aspiration, I look at what Vietnamese families spend on sending their children overseas. So Vietnamese families are very willing to sacrifice quite a lot for their education and a brighter future for their children. Can anyone hazard a guess at how much Vietnamese families spend sending their children overseas for an education?
Under
100 million, did you say? Interesting. Anyone else?
Bye.
Yeah, the whole country last year. All the parents who got to send their children overseas.
There's 50 million.
15 million? How about our MC?
We're shipping for 200.
200 million. 5 billion. 5 billion. And actually the number one market wasn't markets like my home country, the UK, or Australia, or the US. The number one market was Korea, and then Japan in terms of number of students. In terms of spend, because the US is a little bit more expensive for its education, the US took $1.4 billion from Vietnamese parents sending their children overseas. So this includes study costs and living costs, but it's a staggering amount of money. Imagine if that money flowed, it stayed within Vietnam and improved the education system. But this is not uncommon in Asian markets with parents wishing to send their children overseas for an education. So all that money from just 215,000 students, it's staggering. So there is middle class acceleration over the longer term. People are prepared to spend money on what matters to them, particularly their children. We also see an urban migration that continues year after year, and we see households getting smaller. And that means from a consumer FMCG company, those households tend to be wealthier than they were 10 years ago because there's less dependence relying on the income earners. We see a lot of leapfrogging in this country. I talked briefly about it in health and wellness trends, but you know, most people in this room who are Vietnamese probably never had a fixed phone, right? So they jump straight to a smartphone, not even a feature phone, straight to a smartphone. Credit card penetration is about 5-6%, credit card, but everybody has a mobile banking app. I think one of your sponsors might be the main one, Momo. And the way people pay for things has changed dramatically over time. Digital payment is very common now. Momo led the charge Unfortunately for them, they kind of showed the banks what would be possible. The banks improved their mobile applications. Now most people are using their bank's mobile app, paying on a QR code instantly, easily, make their paying. So 40% using bank apps in their latest payment. Domestic stock trading accounts grew from 7 million in 2023 to 9 million last year. So that's domestic consumers having a stock trading account. So that just shows you how financial savviness is changing over time. Can anyone guess why so much growth last year? Anyone? You'd have to be Vietnamese to know this. You know, 2 companies. Momo got a stock trading license, so pushed a lot of their customers to open a trading account. And Sinh, another one that some of the Vietnamese will know, also pushed a lot of customers. So a lot of that change was driven by those 2 financial payment super apps that were pushing customers to open stock trading accounts through the app.
And now, but is there a crypto chocolate?
Is there what?
You have the same crypto?
I don't have the same for crypto, but there is a lot of, it is available. But I mean, there's a lot of crypto interest, or has been until recently. Yeah.
Which only will take use all the large join the domestic income with.
So I have a stock trading account. I don't have a Vietnamese passport, but I have to go through a little bit of paperwork to get it. Well, it's possible. Yeah, it's possible. You have to open a very specific bank account, which is not a normal bank account, and all the money flows have to happen through that particular bank account. So yeah, it's possible. I don't know if it's possible because I reside here, or it's possible for anyone, but it's certainly possible for me as a resident. So the digital economy is another core reason for Vietnam's economic growth. It's a very digitally astute population, 36 billion today, 8% of GDP. Just to put that in perspective, in 2015, so 10 years ago, the digital economy was worth 3 billion. Right? Today it's worth 36 billion. And most of that is in the online shopping world, also online travel, ads, media, gaming, not gambling, and ride-hailing apps like Grab. And the market's interesting that it's mostly dominated by Shopee. Shopee, I think, are probably in this building. They're all the people that mean you can't get in the elevator this morning. They own almost half of the market, the $22 billion market that's going on e-commerce. The green line there is TikTok. So TikTok's gone from being 2% back in 2021 up to 19%. So a very aggressive challenger in the e-commerce space. And then we have Facebook, which is lots and lots of independent sellers on that platform, and then others. Some of the big names that were big names 5 years ago, like Lazada and Tiki, are really getting bashed. So Rich got close when I asked the very early question as to what is driving Vietnam's economic growth. Rich said population size of a young population. He got close as a clue to the answer to this question. Can anybody think of what else might be behind Vietnam's economic growth? I'll give you another hint. You have a session on it later today, I believe, on your agenda. Silence. Okay, it's primarily women. So I'm going to talk about this in a little bit more depth, but women in Vietnam, adult women, 88% of them work. You go to Indonesia, 40%. You go to India, 15%. So imagine the difference that makes to a country's output when you have so many women participating in the workforce. Yes, we have a significant workforce. Of the population, 62% is in the workforce, and that ranges from 20 to 64-year-olds. And about half of those today, 49%, are still of young. So they're digitally astute, more so than people of my age. I'm over 50. So I go into that blue area. We've got a very high female participation. We've got generally young today, but we've also got inexpensive. So this is minimum wage levels. Not everyone pays a minimum wage, even in manufacturing, but it gives us a good clue. So today in Saigon, the minimum wage is $198. That's just about 60% of what it is in Guangzhou, another major manufacturing hub in southern China, the Pearl River. So young, big, women participating, much cheaper than the world's factory, our northern neighbor. But really the issue is the low dependency ratio. So dependents, whether they're old or young, depending on somebody who's earning money in this country is just 0.6. And that's because so many women work. So these factors combine to be a really significant, and I believe the most significant contributor to Vietnam's economic development over the last decade. Can anyone guess which is the fastest growing age group in Vietnam?
To have it 30 to 40.
30 to 40.
Is it a readiness?
It's actually people in my age group. It's the over 50s. So we're rapidly moving into an aging country. So 20 years ago it was 18%. Today it's 28% of the population. By 2036, it's going to be 36% of the population will be over 50. That's 1 in 3 people will be my age. I'll be dead by then. That's it. So it's a radical change, and it has quite a lot of implications for Vietnam's economic model. So we've just said female participation, young population, cheap. This is going to start changing over the next 10 years. So we've got declining levels. This is population by age group in the chart. We've got increasing of the top area, which is the 50 plus, up to 36% over the next 10 years, and declining of the younger segment. Worse still, we've got a rapidly declining birth rate. So to sustain 100 million people, we need women. Sorry, women, it's all on you. We need you to have at least 2.1 children on average. Otherwise, the population, you're all shaking your head saying, not me. But if you don't, the population will eventually start to decline. More people will die, the more people will be born. And this is already happening. So it's at 1.9 now. In 20 years ago, it was at 2.5. And a good indicator of where it's going, if I look at Vinh Long, Ho Chi Minh, Vinh Xuân, Dong Nai, the southeast, the main industrial hub of the country, it's now at 1.4. Right? So my guess is that's where the rest of the country will eventually follow. The trend is set. It's been proven in Japan, and it's very hard to change that trend. So declining population will start to hit home, and an aging population will start to hit home. So actually, it's hard to see in this. This is 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. And the fastest growing group is actually the over 80s, and then the over 70s, and then the over 60s. So it's very much becoming an aging society over the next decade.
But it's very much like
Japan's already there, but yes, it's
trend.
It's following the trend of Southeast Asia, so yeah. It's not unusual. However, this year the government would like to get to 10% economic growth. And there's a reason for this aggression. Because they don't want to become in a middle income trap. They want to escape the middle income trap and move beyond this. And they know they've only got 10 years to do it. Because the demographic dividend that exists today won't exist in 2036 and will become a real challenge in the 2040s. So, if you can open a stock trading account, look at a 10-year plan and expect to exit.
Yeah, that's what we do.
Sorry?
So
it's not what I do, but I hope to be retired by then, but it will become a real challenge.
we have like so we do the Shelley, the story that comes that's in the culture, because otherwise the system doesn't work anymore.
That's why you depend on immigration.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah.
That's why Japan needs more immigration, but struggles to accept it. Maybe you guys with your AI tools and your robotics can help solve some of those issues. So in one way, it's a challenge. In another way, if you're in consumer markets, it's an opportunity. The silver generation, people with my color hair, are a huge untapped opportunity. Most marketing people, most corporates don't think about them because most of their marketing people are in their late 20s. And they just think, oh, people are nuts. But of course, old people tend to have accumulated wealth. They tend to like to travel. They tend to have a lot of unique needs, which can be fulfilled. So this is my wrap up for the next decade. These are the 8 reasons that I think Vietnam will do extremely well. There's going to be some short-term volatility this year. But over the next 10 years, we can expect strong growth. And then some more structural issues will come into play. Thank you for listening. Ask questions if you would like.
And the students or the students of the great aspect for any other topics that they want to dive in.
Yes. Yes, please. Yeah, that reached the point, surprisingly, $5 million spent by families for their kids as students abroad. But the question interest would be, is it a good outcome if how many of those students, while educated, come back to Vietnam and not stay out to have the culture to come back?
To be honest, a lot have to come back because visa regimes abroad are very tough. So if you take the UK, for example, it's very hard to stay beyond your education. It's very hard as a graduate to get an employer sponsored to go through a process that would enable you to stay. It's expensive with an employer. You go to the US, I think you have 2 or 3 months to leave after you finish your studies.
Meets everybody's coming back, and it's for investment.
No. I don't know about Rich's experience, but I can be interviewing 2 graduates. One who's been educated at a good university that I know in my own country. One who's been educated here at the University of Economics. I don't see a lot of difference, and I don't see a lot of difference in the salary expectation between the person educated overseas. I think it probably makes a difference if you really go to a top-tier university, like a top 10 global university, but most are not going to a top 10 university.
And we stay here.
Sorry?
Why don't they stay here to invest in this what's there?
Because it's very much the belief that that's the route to a brighter future. The proof doesn't bear out, but for many, the proof does bear out. But it's a route to a brighter future or a route to an alternate passport is often the reason people are doing. It's quite interesting when I do research in this territory and I speak to the parents who have spent the money. They don't actually know which university their child has gone to. So they'll be like, University of California. Which University of California? And they don't know. And they get on their phone, they follow their child overseas to find out what it's called. Then you realize they've gone to a state university, not perhaps one of the better universities, but they don't really understand the next generation of what it is they're buying. Please.
We have those kind of universities that you ask ethical, predictable.
Yeah. In this country, I only put it, I would put it in land, but I just got divorced and I've lost all the land that I've acquired over the last 20 years, so I'm not very happy about that. But I only put it in companies that I know. So I do invest in the stock exchange here, but I only do it in companies that I actually understand their operation, their business model, and have a very good idea on what might be commercially true or otherwise. Yeah.
How I'm really shocked. Well, Korea,
Japan and Korea.
yeah,
really shocked about this one. About Korea, Japan, we two top places beating each other. That's because come alive with you would be surprised if you
I was very surprised.
everyone knows English business, right?
But, well, that's changing, right? There's a lot of aspiration towards Korea. There's a lot of aspiration towards working with the Japanese. And it's not just going to a business studies degree or an engineering degree. A lot of those people are going across and doing technical training programs as well.
That's Korea.
That's
There's Japanese.
yeah. Part of their studies would be to understand the language, of course. Yeah. So it's a cultural immersion, a language immersion, and an educational immersion. But some of them are very vocational oriented in Japan. Pretty.
Right. What's good? You get the Vietnamese and the Korean. Let's give the goals Korea as they and government Philippines administrable.
Yeah. I mean, there's more Korean expats here than there are as a clue than all the other nationalities combined. So, yeah, you just don't like it, but it's the way it is.
No, it's not that I don't like it. I mean, the Vietnamese, the wealthy families are the ones that need their Jibra, Zach, Pedrag, and the wealthy families are the San Diego Big one, in fact, was shut. And everyone there that's in with business language, among those wealthy families, shut, top just surprise.
Yeah. I mean, so if you look at the Korea and Japanese training programs, a lot of them are government sponsored, a lot of them are vocational type training programs. And those numbers also included high school students, although that's primarily Australia and the US and Canada, sorry. People are sending kids to high school.
Brad, 3 more questions.
Go ahead.
You're seeing very positive about the near and even long-term future about Vietnam's economy.
Yes.
Actually, we saw listen to very similar each by the Joseph Dutch company and for my university.
I don't know who he is, but yeah, I know the university.
And he portrayed a lot of beauty things.
Okay. The long term being
10 years.
okay.
So he comes more from a non way of voice, political challenges. And if you're come from consumer or high cost.
Yeah, also econometrics though. I mean, I haven't met Jonathan, but so the next 10 years, we're going to see high growth. But after that, it's going to be a challenge.
He's just really later.
Does it get us over that? Can we develop into a high income economy? That's the challenge. I mean,
Get into a range aside from triple he's
yeah,
he did
yeah.
the short to the law, right? So it's for the next 10 years better not stop.
Yes,
But then will go lead up.
it's a real challenge. And probably for the reasons he spoke about, the core reason I believe will be the population stretch, will be the challenge. There's not the social net to look after an aging population. There is a social net. There are insurance payments through the government. There's not enough for people to live on. And I don't know how long you've been coming to Saigon for, but the skyline is now blocked with high rise. A lot of young people don't want to live with an extended family. But there's not a lot of infrastructure for looking after for aged care. There's almost no infrastructure. So if you're not with family, who's going to look after? Yeah, it's going to become a lot of policy challenges. Yeah.
Anyone have any other question?
Yes.
Yeah, here.
I'm kind of literally surprised of like we share that the court it's crazy is when working on tops, right? Vietnam like do you think that's the good side or the best side of the Vietnamese entities?
I think there's two things, right? It's the reason why Vietnam has been such a dynamic place. I mean, I'm sure your visitors tell you how dynamic and fast-paced and the rate of change they see in Vietnam, how encouraging it is compared to their own markets. So it's been a fantastic help to Vietnam's development. The problem is in 2036, that dividend will disappear, will start to disappear. By 2040, it will become a real issue for government policy, how to look after these old people. You know what payments to Lissa are going to give you when you retire, right? It's not going to be enough to live on. So who's going to look after these people?
That's right. By the way, this problem existed in huge problem, social system, more or less people paid into the system.
Yeah.
So it's a real problem.
But I don't know the German system, but I imagine you have much more of a social net than we have here. The social net here is family, more so than anything else.
The social net inspection works only if all more people pay to the system and taking out.
Yeah.
I first already, so I have to pay the part of money for later on retirement money. It's not enough every.
Yeah. So for those of you who are Vietnamese, you'll know that the Lissa used to calculate your pension. There's really no pensions industry here, but your payments post redundancy or exit of your company based on the last 6 years' salary. They now take it on your last 25 years. So you can imagine those average payments have just dropped significantly because they know what's coming. Thank you. Thanks so much for being here. I'm here if you want to ask me a question.